Hey there, everybody. Welcome to DePINed, the podcast where we focus on DePIN projects, founders, and the ecosystem. My name is Tom Trowbridge. I'm the host. I am thrilled today to have Alex Rawitz with us, founder of DIMO. And if you are in DePIN, you must know DIMO. And if you don't, you have not been in DePIN very long. So with that, I want to turn it over to Alex. And Alex, one of the things, I ask people to begin with usually is, how do you define DePIN? Because as this industry grows, as it gets hotter, it's kind of expanding. And so I think it's pretty important that we have a common definition that we can stick to so it doesn't become meaningless. So kind of curious what your thoughts are there.
Well, first off, Tom, thanks for having me on. I love chatting about DIMO and DePIN and crypto more broadly too. I've been in the space for quite a while, so it's something I'm really, really passionate about. But DePIN's really interesting. 2 years ago, this term didn't exist. And now there seems to be hundreds of projects that are DePIN related. And I think that I think it's become a little bit watered down, but I think that there's some incredibly quality projects. And I do think that this is one of the most important stories in the crypto world and areas of innovation. And so I define DePIN, to me, it's the permissionless deployment of infrastructure in the physical world by any group of people, by any person in an open governance system. So to me, there's a few parts of that really matter. One is that pretty much anybody can deploy that infrastructure. You, in the case of Helium, probably consider the original DePIN project. Anyone could put up the required networking equipment to support their IoT network. In the case of DIMO, anyone can connect their car to our open connected vehicle platform. In the case of some of the other projects, whether it's energy or mapping or this or that, any person can go and deploy this infrastructure. And I think that that's really important. I think that is really what creates the democratization of this key infrastructure. And I think the other key part, in addition to anyone being able to do it, the infrastructure that they deploy is part of a global network where the necessary open source components are in place such that my telecom infrastructure that I'm putting up in the Helium world, or my connected car, or my virtual power plant, whatever it is that I'm connecting, is part and networked with hundreds of thousands, millions of other people around the world. I think those are the two components. If anything, actually, I'm not saying anything about blockchain. It doesn't have to have a blockchain, although I think that there's a lot of use cases, and it's very, many ways the blockchain is important to this sector. But I think the connection to the physical world and the geospatial component is also a really important part of DePIN.
So listen, 100% agreed with that. I like your focus on permissionless. That is important. And the ability to be inclusive where that anybody can do it. There's usually some level of capital requirement, but those can be extreme if you go to, a Filecoin mining kind of rig or whatever, to minimal if you're talking about or even you could even rent, potentially, a device for whether it's Helium or, WeatherXM, et cetera. The one I'm using, which kind of overlaps a lot with what you said, but slightly different, is crowdsourced physical infrastructure bound together in a common software layer, secured by crypto economics. And so the secured by crypto is something you said you're not totally sure if that's necessary. But yet it's hard to have that crowdsourced infrastructure without that security, which crypto generally provides.
Yeah, I think that. So what you're getting at, I think, brings up one of the distinctions in the DePIN space that has become, in my opinion, more and more poignant lately, which is that there's a big difference between a platform or a platform protocol, and an app. And you're seeing a lot of apps these days have some physical component and launch a token. Hey, now there's a token that incentivizes the users to buy our little device or something like that. But it's not a platform, and it's not a protocol, and it's not really infrastructure that other people can build on. One example that comes up all the time, people have been really, I saw this in Hong Kong, and I've had people ask me about it in New York. Say, well, what about a smart ring? Is a smart ring a DePIN project? And I was like, well, on its own, no, in my opinion. It's just an incentivized product, a token incentivized product. If it's part of a healthcare platform where you can have smart rings and smart wearables and smart ambient, sensors in your home, and all of this comes together in part of a platform that other developers can build on, then maybe we're talking about a platform here. But I do think that if you have a platform, securing things by crypto and securing things on the blockchain makes a lot more sense, and it is a lot more important. So I think that piece really gets at one of the, how do we want to define DePIN versus how is it being defined in the real world?
Fair enough. Listen, I get that. I get that for sure. Well, it's a good transition to your project. Tell us about DIMO, and for the few people out there that haven't heard of it.
I'd actually like to start by telling a little story, which is, about 5 or 6 years ago, there was a pretty dramatic shift in the automotive industry. And that was really the turning point when most cars started to be connected. Some automakers got a head start, which started a little bit earlier, 10 years ago with OnStar. Other automakers are still behind the curve on connecting their cars. But by and large, about 5-6 years ago marks the transition point. And what does that mean? So every car that rolls out of a factory that's newly made is now made with a cellular modem built in it so that it can send its data back to the company servers. And every single automaker is building their own walled garden. They're basically embracing the big tech data approach that has, been, all over Silicon Valley and all over the tech world for the last 20 years. So all of these automakers, dozens and dozens of them, are building their own data in their own silos and their own platforms. And the founders of DIMO, when we, working and being in the auto space, observed this, realized that this is a way to massively shortchange the potential of what it means to have a connected car. So about 3 years ago, we started DIMO, and the purpose of DIMO is to create an open connected vehicle platform. If you've been in crypto for a while, I liken this to, the purpose of crypto in the financial services industry is to create an open ledger that any bank or payment processor or, exchange can tap into. You don't have to worry about the silos. In the auto space, we want to create a layer that any OEM, insurance company, automotive services company, maintenance company, dealership, anyone can tap into. So we've built this open connected car platform, which is a data layer for the trillion-dollar auto industry. And in addition to starting the work on that protocol, we've also launched the first app on DIMO. We call it DIMO Mobile. This is a handy app that anyone can download, anyone can use to connect their car, see a little bit of data about their car, and start exploring the apps that are being deployed on DIMO. So that means from our app in the DIMO verse, you can actually connect to companies that will accept your data and give you a better quote on let's say a vehicle warranty. You can share your data with a company that builds fleet tools. You can share your data with a company that does maintenance. And all the while, consumers are in control of their own vehicle data.
Can you help us understand what vehicle data means?
Yeah.
Sounds good, but is it 10 pieces? Is it 2,000 pieces of data, frequency, et cetera?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So cars are data centers on wheels right now. And they've been gradually becoming smarter and more networked over the last couple of decades. So cars are going to generate all kinds of categories of data. The first is going to be a lot of geospatial data. So we have a lot of companies that are interested in the data that DIMO is creating around mobility infrastructure. Where are people driving? Where are they needing to charge their electric vehicles? Where are people going? There's a lot of uses for that geospatial data. You can even map cellular networks, with that data. There's a ton of information around the maintenance of vehicles. So, how what's the health of the engine? What's the oil level? What's the intake pressure? You can scan for error codes within the car. Virtually every component of the vehicle has its own sensor and is networked. And so by reading the data from the vehicle, you can actually see how that is performing, or at least how that piece is performing within the system of the vehicle. You can even see data about how the car is being used, how it's being driven. Is it being driven aggressively? Is it being driven carefully? Or is the driver using the cruise control very often? So there's all of these facets of the vehicle data that can inform use cases like insurance or maintenance, or whether the car is above or below the typical sales price for that car after it's been driven for a few years. And what we have found is that companies in the auto space are really, really hungry for this data. They've never had access to this kind of first-party data before, where a user can show up and say, hey, here are my error codes. Here's what's wrong with my car. I've already scanned it. I can share that with you and get a quote or get an understanding of what's up with my car before I even drive to the shop.
So many questions to dig into. So first, help us understand scale. Is this 1,000 data points of which 500 are collected every second, like the location stuff, but the engine is once a minute, or some are once a day, or only error codes are like, event specific? Like, how do we think about this amount of data points and frequency?
There certainly are event specific things like error codes. Those are event specific. And there's actually several levels of, let's say, the diagnostic trouble codes. So there are some DTC codes, as they're called, that are that put up the check engine light that say, hey, you gotta go get something looked at here. And others that are sort of running on the CAN bus, which is the computer network of the car. They're just kind of running in the background, little things that could be going on or off that might indicate a problem or might just go away on their own. The sensors themselves, whether if you're looking at something like engine speed or intake pressure or some of the things that are actually going on in the mechanics of the car, you could be getting sub-second, 5 hertz level data if you'd really like, and be consuming that all the time. Many use cases, you're probably not going to need that level of data and that level of accuracy to tell, let's say, a trend that something is wrong with the engine and you should go get it looked at or get something cleaned or something like that. But it really can depend. Insurance companies are going to look for, let's say, roughly 1 hertz data on geospatial location and then maybe a little bit about speed. But you don't really need to necessarily get down to that level. If you wanted to just think about the aggregate amount of data that a car produces, about 25 gigabytes an hour is where most metrics put it at these days.
And of that, as a consumer, a DIMO user, do you opt in to both to what data you want to collect, and then you further opt into what data you want to share?
So it is completely opt in all the way through the user experience. The one part where you don't have really an opt-in is on what data you want to collect. You're sort of at the mercy of how you connect your car in that regard. Let's say you have one of the cool things is that we can actually offer people the ability to connect their car either through hardware or software. So if you have a modern Tesla, you actually don't need any DIMO hardware. You can just download the mobile app, connect your Tesla, and stream data right from the Tesla APIs. There, we're going to help you collect as all of the data that API provides. We certainly don't want people to have to think through, okay, well, do I want this data on intake pressure and this one on? We're just going to try to get you everything that you could possibly use. In terms of sharing that data, absolutely 100% opt-in. The user never shares that data with anyone unless you're prompted to do so. And that could be in the case of sharing it with an insurance company if you want to, sharing it for sale. A lot of users do come to us because they want to monetize their data and they say, hey, here you go. If you can sell my data for something, go for it.
It's fascinating. Well, there's so much more I want to dig into on this, but want to back up for 1 second and talk about your background and how you ended up here.
So I started my career in startups about 10 years ago. And one of the earliest companies that I joined was a company that was called Survedo. We built hardware and software for remote monitoring in the telecom space. And I was, very early exposed to the IoT world, especially the industrial IoT world outside of wearables and things like that. And it was while I was there that I revisited the crypto world. I had known about Bitcoin for some time, but Ethereum really kind of was the one that opened my eyes to what crypto could be in the concept of smart contracts and machine-to-machine payments. There just seemed to be such a beautiful overlap between what was being built in the Ethereum world and what the IoT world needed. So I really fell down the rabbit hole of crypto in 2017. I joined Chainalysis in 2018 and lived in the blockchain analytics world for a couple of years, working in the private sector, and then kind of got really interested in Helium because I saw it as one of the first really, really elegant use cases of blockchain outside of permissionless blockchains, outside of the financial sector. There's cool stuff going on in supply chains and this and that.
DeFi,
but
yeah.
Yeah, and DeFi was cool, but Helium was like the first project to really get out there and say, what if we built this wireless network around blockchain incentives and secured in a cryptographic way? That really opened my eyes, and we started, jamming on ideas, my co-founders and I. And a couple of years later, after messing around in the Helium world for some time and really hacking on ideas for a couple of years, brought the version of DIMO that you see today.
Well, we've got that in common. I discovered Helium a while ago and launched a mini network in Mexico, actually.
Cool.
So I think a little bit too late to be profitable, but have been through the experience. And then any more automotive background in you or your founders?
Me personally, no, but my co-founders bring a wealth of automotive experience working at mobility companies. Our CTO, Yev, spent a decade at automakers working on their connected car platforms. So has really built connected car platforms at scale before. Rob was at Vroom, which is a large automaker, used car marketplace. And then Andy was at Waymo working in the mobility space. So we really brought a lot of kind of expertise in the automotive and IoT space and melded it with the crypto background.
Very cool. Well, listen, you mentioned the melding with the crypto background, and what I think you kind of mentioned this early on, but I want to return to because I think it's important. Sounds like from what you said earlier about cars changing about 5 years ago, that and I may be putting words in your mouth here, tell if I'm wrong, but you needed the confluence of the car development software platform to get to a maturity level, and then you need a software platform to get to a maturity level, and then maybe crypto in a way to get to maturity level. And all those things had to coincide to make DIMO possible. Like this wasn't possible. You tell me 3 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever, like this, it's not like this is a new idea that could have existed a long time ago, right?
No, for 100 years, the car industry was not connected. Cars were not networked. It's a bit like, Bitcoin couldn't have existed before the internet or, before payments institutions really started to come online, and could actually provide on-ramps and things like that. The auto industry is at a really interesting point. And I think this is one of the important things to look at from an industry perspective. I think as people look and see a DePIN for this and a DePIN for that and a blockchain over here and a blockchain over there, like it's important to ask how ready the industry is to be disruptive and be disrupted. And if you look at what's happened in the auto industry, you have connected vehicles, which that transition has really only started, about 5-6 years ago. You have electric vehicles, another massive transformation in the auto space. And you have autonomous vehicles, which are being worked on. And so you have these three huge mega trends, one alone, which would be disrupting the auto space. But instead we have three all happening at the same time. With some overlap in terms of the technology and the ways that they're changing the industry. But there's really never been a time before this, probably since the inception of the auto industry, where there's been as much change in what's happening at automakers, at dealerships, and in the industry generally. And so it's a really exciting time to be building in that space. And I think that there's a clear opportunity for new technology like DIMO to make an impact.
When you're thinking about DIMO, you're collecting data, but the car is generating that data. So presumably the manufacturer is also collecting that data. So is the benefit that you're collecting at scale more than any one manufacturer, so you have a better data set, or is it that you have better distribution and monetization of that data, or that you're permissioning it versus consumers not permissioning it or unwittingly permissioning it with their vehicles?
You hit on a couple of really important points there. So the first, let's just start with, are the automakers collecting the data too? This is going to become a very, very interesting area of debate over the next few years, especially of course, as we see, the privacy debates enter the world stage. Basically, and there has been a lot of, one of the other facets of the auto industry that's been really important to this whole automotive data conversation is the right to repair. So right to repair laws in the US have more or less enshrined the user's right to the data. Despite automakers trying to keep the data out of users' hands, those have enshrined the right that users can access that data. And then two, the automakers are going to have increasing pressure to provide the right to be forgotten. And they're not really equipped to handle that privacy question. And so, the best way to handle that is to just put the data into the user's hands and let the user make the decisions. That way you don't have to worry about the right to be forgotten. The user always has the right to the data through right to repair laws. It kind of is a win-win. So the question is, though, are automakers collecting that data? If you subscribe to your automaker's platform, your Toyota app, they are collecting the data. In fact, my Toyota app, when I got my new car, it came with a little sticker that said, here you have the connectivity services. Here you go. By the way, also Toyota's collecting all your data. Thanks very much. Tesla has come out with an interesting position. And I think as they have done in the automotive space for some time, they're going to push the Overton window here, which is Tesla has said, we won't collect your data. We're going to give you access to it as a user. We won't collect it, but it's your data, and we will never share it outside of, outside of your permission. Which brings us to the next point you brought up, which is distribution. We think the fundamental flaw in automakers building their own connected vehicle platforms is that they will never achieve the distribution of that data to other developers that make for a compelling ecosystem. And let me explain what I mean by that. So your phone is compelling and interesting, and you probably use it all day long because it has an open developer platform with it. Any developer in the world can build an app that works on your phone. And most people probably spend the majority of their time using their phone, using apps that are not the native apps that their iPhone or Android came with. They're using stuff from the App Store. When you buy a car from Toyota or Ford or Tesla even, and the only app that you get is the app from the automaker, it's just like being locked into only the apps that you got with your phone. So there needs to be an app store for cars. The car maker that has done this is Tesla, and they've actually opened up a developer platform, and there's now 5 or 6 different apps that you can download as a Tesla user to use as an alternative to the Tesla app. This makes the car more interesting as a user. Like, you can pick and choose which app you like best. There's different options. So the real distribution that an automaker really wants, and that DIMO is positioned to provide, is distribution to developers. So we have now over 100 developers who have reached out to DIMO to build on our data and on our platform and on our APIs, because they recognize that it's the easiest way to build across automakers. Instead of having to build something for Toyota and build something for Ford and build something for BMW, you can come to DIMO's platform and build an app that works on any car, whether that's a dynamic insurance app, usage-based insurance, or a maintenance app, or a performance app for your car. You can build something that works for any car. So it's both a combination of that sort of distribution that we think ultimately wins and trumps the closed automaker approach, and eventually the data moat. I think your point on being able to have cars across different OEMs is a really compelling story to developers, because you want to build for any car in the world, not just for Mercedes.
Yeah, but what you're talking about really, I think, is as cars, you mentioned this, become effectively software platforms.
Yes.
Right? Your app basically commoditizes the vehicle, because as you build a software platform, selling the software is the value, not the metal. And so if your app store is better, then presumably car companies are hoping and banking on selling software services, but we all know they're terrible. I think back to the native mapping software that they spend God knows how much money, each individual company developing its own stupid map software, when there's far superior options in the market. I'm like, why do they just burn this money? Every single car maker made their own mapping software, just colossally wasted. And they did it because they wanted to charge for it. And so what you're talking about effectively is removing them from the software business and relegating them to just hardware manufacturers, I think.
That you're right on the general direction, but having been in this space long enough, we recognize that that's a tough sell to automakers, and we are not, listen, we're not the as problematic as I think many entities in the traditional financial world are, and so much of the governance in the space, government involvement in the traditional financial world are, we're not the like burn the banks crypto guys here at DIMO. And like, there's a lot of things that I think crypto fixes about the traditional world, but it's more of the like meet them where they're at. They have pretty incredible superpowers in the auto space. I mean, it is incredibly hard. I mean, just look at Tesla's struggles. Tesla's done some very cool things and they get a lot of hype, but just in terms of matching sheer production capability of what the other entrenched automakers can do, they're still nowhere close. So it's those automakers do impressive things when it comes to moving metal, and they haven't done such impressive things when it comes to software. So we have taken a more kind of, or long term, we have a more nuanced vision where the automakers can do what they do best, pushing metal, still benefit from the upside of connected services by providing the connectivity. They can sell the connectivity subscriptions. They could probably monetize their own app stores in certain ways, but they need to embrace some of the open components. And the best way to do that is to leverage open source software like we're creating in DIMO, and actually have developers build, let's say if you're Ford or you're BMW or whoever you are in the auto space, you can have a developer build an app on DIMO that you can still monetize as Ford or BMW. That's where it actually can pay to have a more open economic system and have tokenomics that they can eventually engage with, although that's certainly going to take a long time. But even outside of that, there's ways that those automakers can monetize their software services and still focus on pushing metal. And the one other point I'll make is that we do think that the software services are going to be a very important component to car ownership. And the days of car and driver taking a car out and 2 days on the road, here's how it drove, here's what the inside's like, are going to give way. I mean, there already are. People are reviewing the infotainment system, but it's going to go even deeper into the software. So as an example, at some point last year, I think Nissan's APIs went down for like 3 days. Nobody's Nissan app worked. And it was like, well, if you're a consumer, that kind of sucks. What's the API uptime of my automaker? How often are they updating the software? There's been reports last year, BMW, Rivian, off the top of my head, they pushed software updates to the cars that bricked the infotainment system or made something else not work in the car. Cars are going to get software updates in your garage. You as a consumer are going to have to become a lot more familiar with the software on your vehicle than you ever were before. And that's, I think, there's going to be opportunities for automakers to differentiate themselves in that world, but also to embrace open source software, as many companies have done to build better products.
I do not look forward to the world where I have to embrace a whole app store for my vehicle. My vehicles are old. They do not have that, but I know that is a future coming. But you mentioned
by the way, as much as I'm like, even though I am building this infrastructure for that purpose, like I'm also, I will have for, I think forever, one dumb car that is just not connected, and then one connected car where I can have the coolest toys and the newest features. But like, to me, having one unconnected car is extremely desirable. I want something without any telemetry, without any networking. And, I will just be happy to have one dumb car at home and one very smart, networked up car.
Yeah, it's more when I don't know when I'll have that network car. We will see. But you mentioned token economics. So help us understand, because I imagine this gets into incentives for people to share data, and there's probably lots of other incentives as well. But how does that work in DIMO?
Yeah, I would say our tokenomics are somewhat bland, like very similar to what a lot of other projects do. There's an incentive to join the network and get started for drivers, which means if you connect your car to DIMO, you get rewarded in a certain amount of DIMO tokens in DIMO. In our case, it's once a week. There's a certain amount of tokens. The longer you're connected, the bigger share of the weekly drop that you earn. Pretty straightforward. Thanks for being here. That bonus, or the baseline issuance as we call it, tapers off and will taper off over the next 40 years. Pretty straightforward.
And just to be clear, that is just a set number of tokens, irrespective of the token price. And
Correct.
that amount tapers off. Is it half every 6 months or every year, or is it just steady decline, or how does that work out of curiosity?
15% decline once a year for 40 years.
Fine. And so how far in that are you now?
We are a year and a half in. So it launched in December 12th of 2022.
And how many cars are connected?
We have about 85,000 cars connected today.
Gotcha. And so
I don't keep up on the math for this, but I know obviously a lot of people do. I think the earnings are, so there's a couple of different ways to connect your car. And depending on the way to connect your car, I'm pretty sure it's about between $10 and $20 a week to start in terms of like what people are earning lately. But obviously that's very dependent on the number of cars, volatile, token price, things like that. Yeah.
Number two big variables you don't control.
Yep. Yeah.
And okay. So that's sort of join the network, get some tokens. Great.
Yep.
What's next?
So I'll talk about the one other sort of bonus and like incentive to drivers, and then we'll flip over to the demand side. Who's paying for the data and how does that work? So the other interesting part of what we've done is in creating this marketplace of automotive services where I can go and book maintenance or buy a warranty or even sell my car on DIMO. Many of the providers that are automotive service providers that are coming into the ecosystem to offer services in the marketplace are also offering basically referral fees and bonuses to users. So depending on what kind of service you use, you might get 10% back on maintenance, or actually if you, I just bought a warranty for my car through DIMO, I'm going to get $125 back in DIMO tokens. So we've added a layer of incentive. A lot of people say, well, once the token rewards dry up, no one's going to use this. And A, we're going to build a great product and have built a great product, so people are going to use it on that merit alone. And B, there's going to be ways to continue earning. So we've designed, because we want DIMO to bridge outside of the crypto space, we've designed everything around the marketplace and the token earning experience to look and feel like an airline reward point for your car, so that you could hand this to somebody who doesn't care about crypto and doesn't want to think about tokenomics and say, hey, here's a cool tool. It's going to make you a smarter, better car owner. By the way, if you book maintenance or buy tires or whatever it is you do in the mobile app, you even sell your car eventually through the mobile app, you're going to earn extra reward points. And one day you'll be able to spend those reward points. So it's very much a, just kind of create a loyalty program around the app and the product itself.
But are those loyalty points tokens, or are those something different?
They are tokens. So,
fine. So you're just a nomenclature terminology thing. So you effectively earn tokens by using the platform.
Yep, you earn tokens more for using the platform more, and we believe in hiding the wires. Like you can deliver. I think today that a lot technology has matured enough that we can deliver a user the cryptographic security, the ability to own their own private keys, all of these things without forcing them to write down a 12-word seed phrase and learn about tokens and sign transactions. Like no, you're going to earn rewards. Token point, whatever, and you're going to spend rewards, token point, whatever. So we're very focused on like delivering that kind of seamless experience that a Web 2 user wouldn't even think too much about.
But the distinction is that if the reward is the same as a token, that can trade and can be valued at some very clear monetization, which is not so simple in reward points.
It is definitely going to be. I think if you were to hand the app as it is today to a user who is like, okay, cool, I have 1,000 DIMO, cool rewards. What can I spend it on? And then like what they can get out of that. Well, yesterday I could get an oil change and today I can get 2. Like that's weird. It will be a little bit of an odd, I guess, experience for some. And we'll have to think about some ways to abstract that away. But it is going to be something that I think, by nature of having a volatile asset, hopefully it gets to the point where all of crypto gets to the point where we're not seeing these huge bull bear swings that we've seen over the last, however long. But, it could always be a fairly volatile asset.
Well, yeah, I'm not holding my breath because these are all long date. These are all long dated projects, right? So any change in terminal value has a massive impact up front. So that's even think about this as a venture investment, right? That was just marked as an equity. It'd be moving around, but you also could just see markets of people just buying these, like within fiat. Oh, you got 100 points. I'll give you $50 for them, and just people just quickly be able to monetize them easily.
Yeah, and your point about just imagine if all of these tokens were equities. Like, there's a reason you don't get Apple rewards and Apple stock. Like, yeah, like it is complicated, and apart from the regulatory stuff, it just like would be a complicated experience. Like my Delta Sky Miles are distinct from mine. So
Delta stock, yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's, and it's interesting, talking about it, like one of the things we're doing on the demand side, and Helium was one of the first projects to introduce this, if not the first. I don't know the long history about it, but, they recognized that people who want the consumers of the network, the people that want to use the fact that there's now an IoT network built out, they realized that nobody who's using this network wants to show up and pay in a volatile asset. No one wants to have to think, I paid this much this month and now all of a sudden it's a different amount and I have to worry about conversion. So they created another asset called the data credit. So you pay in a stable data credit, the same, $1,000 gets you 1,000 data credits or whatever it is every single time. And they use the amount of data credits spent to burn
helium. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. The fluctuating amount of HNT. Or now IoT, it's become a little bit more complicated on their side. We are introducing the same mechanism on our demand side. So if a developer shows up to consume DIMO data, they're going to buy DIMO data credits. That data credit is going to create some burn. I suppose it could introduce something similar on the consumer side, so that kind of abstract away some of the volatility there. But that's something that we'll have to think about a little bit more in terms of an app experience. That would be more of an app decision, like what does DIMO Mobile want to do versus a protocol layer decision.
Well, so and then the last piece I'm missing is there's a set reward schedule, expires after 4 years. You're a year and a half into it.
40 years.
40.
Yeah. So it'll be around for a while.
Sense.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Makes much more sense.
Long-term time horizon,
like, 4
as you
years,
said.
Gotta get going. All right.
Oh, no.
And then but the next point is people buy your token and it's burned. But then how does the token reward for if I use an app, I get rewarded? How is that reward calibrated and where does that come from?
Yeah. So let's take an app as an example. Let's say a usage-based insurance app. And we're working with a couple of insurance companies right now. None live yet, but hopefully in the next few months, we'll see the first couple go live. They're going to consume DIMO data shared by the user, and then the user is going to get a dynamic insurance product. So that insurance company has, first off, they have to pay for the data. So they will show up, they'll input their, probably not a credit card, an invoice or whatever, but they're going to buy the DIMO data credits in their developer console, and then they'll spend those data credits. Each time a user shows up and says, hey, insurance company ABC, here's my data, you can give me a quote or I'm signing up for your service. They are also permissioning that insurance company, here's my stream of data. And it might start pretty minimal. Here's my GPS location and my speed. These insurance companies are not yet ready to process all the data, but here's my data that you need to give me the product. The insurance company pays for that data, creates some burn, and some of the cost is passed back to the user. So there's some token burn, and there's also some that's passed back to the user. Now, the thing is, we're talking about a couple of bucks a month in terms of what the data costs. And that's just what the rate is for one app to buy data from you, one car owner. So that's not really going to be where the big bulk of, let's say, a user's reward experience comes from. Yes, there's some burn, and you're maybe earning a little bit back as part of the insurance company subscribing to your data. But the biggest thing comes from the incentives that these companies are paying out to acquire users. So, that insurance company is probably going to pay something from $20 to a couple $100 to acquire a user. And that's what's also getting, that is being converted into DIMO tokens and given back to a user today. And that you can do in the marketplace already. We have warranty companies, financing companies that'll pay hundreds of dollars to a user in just like, thanks for signing up money. And that's reward given back as a reward. So it's really those two independent pieces. There's the, here's the kind of sign up bonus that you get and the ongoing subscription to the data.
So sign a 5-year contract or a 2-year contract, whatever it is, and get $100 in DIMO tokens right away. And then maybe sharing your data, you'll earn $1 or $2 a month. going forward. And then on top of it, presumably you're going to have lower rates as well as part of all that.
Presumably you have lower rates. And by the way, it might not involve signing a contract. There's also maintenance companies in the app. So, there's maintenance companies. If I book kind of just a checkup, oil change, AC filter, like just kind of general works, like I'll get 25% of my maintenance back. So that's not signing up for a contract or a subscription either. It's really all about like in these instances where you're actually spending some money in the marketplace, you're earning some of the take back. Now, there is the possibility that we also, we're focusing a lot and we're talking a lot, and this is honestly the right area of emphasis. We're focusing a lot on what, as an individual user, would you go and use? How do you sign up for insurance? How do you book maintenance? How do you sell your car? There is the path where we can sell aggregate data as well. So companies are showing up to say, hey, well, we want to buy 100,000 cars worth of data so that we can map, electric vehicle chargers or whatever it is they're interested in. And so we're as a company already supporting those use cases and selling some data in aggregate and anonymized data with the user's permission to earn them extra sort of subscription revenue. But the vast majority of the token earnings are going to come from users interacting with apps on their own that are giving them sign-up bonuses, paying them other kinds of bonuses in the app, or just generally subscribing to their data.
Still questions.
Yeah, sure.
So lastly, it sounds like some portion of the monthly fee is burned. And so that is your deflationary scarcity mechanism, right? Beside that, that's the core of it, because otherwise it seems like it's a recycle. People buy it, and most of it goes back to the consumer, which is great. Yeah. But then you need to have some mechanism for that something to be worth $1 versus a penny versus $1,000, right? So is that deflationary component the main driver of scarcity and the value, the token being worth one thing versus another?
Yeah, and the exciting part is that really the right way to answer that is that it will be. So the actual token burn mechanics haven't been officially implemented yet. It's been something that's been discussed in some governance proposals, which will go up for vote here eventually. And then, that will get most likely put into place and codified over the course of, this year or so. So, those are the sorts of things that are being finalized. And yes, that ultimately that deflationary aspect is going to be something that gets put in at the protocol level.
Well, help us understand how big this can be, because there's a lot of cars. So yeah. How big can this be? And you say we sometimes. So does that mean that you've got a BD team out there at the level, basically trying to, is this a counterparty effectively to the insurance companies, et cetera?
The auto space is trillions and trillions of dollars. The used car market alone in the US is $1 trillion industry. There are about $1 trillion of car loans that are live in the US. We really think of the total potential size or for DIMO in terms of what is the GMV of the auto industry as a whole. So people themselves will spend usually upwards of $20,000 over the life cycle of their vehicle on things like financing and maintenance and all of the pieces that go into maintaining a car. So, between the fact that these are trillion dollar industries without any data layer between them, we certainly believe that DIMO could, support the entire industry. It's hard to even put a size on what that entails. We believe easily that there's billions and billions of dollars of value to be unlocked between developers and enterprises and consumers. So we're really focused on that long-term plan and making sure that DIMO can have the biggest impact that it can across all of these huge facets of the auto industry. That's just going to be something that takes a very long time to unlock, just as we've seen in the financial sector. Despite all the amazing innovation in crypto and DeFi, it's taking a long time to migrate the whole financial sector on chain. But our vision is that the entire automotive industry goes on chain, and that, automakers are producing cars that are immediately connected to DIMO, and a financing company can immediately, benefit from that data. And all along, that data is, cryptographically secured, and users are in control of it.
Listen, I love it, and it's definitely huge. The slightly scary thing, though, is that the more successful you are, the more insurance companies will be accustomed to getting that data, which means the more you may end up in a world where you're successful, and now all of a sudden you can't get insurance unless you share everything. Right? That is, you could end up there, right? Which is kind of an interesting place where you have all permissions, but there will be very few providers who will deal with people unless you give away all of this data.
Yeah, I agree with that as a scary proposition. And I think that the best way to combat that, basically the best way to combat the power of these insurance companies and automakers, and really anyone that wants to try to take power away from users, is to make sure that users are in control of their own data. So in our vision of what DIMO is to the automotive industry, it's an immediate sort of conduit for the user to take over control of the car data from the moment they buy the car. And, to your point, I bought this car from Toyota. Toyota has a partnership with Progressive, and I get an email from Progressive every 3 months that says, "Hey, you're a good driver. Why don't you come join Progressive?" And, I'm probably not the most I'm fairly private, but I also have a kind of open-mindedness to that data sharing, where I'm like, well, in one world, I'd rather it actually be shared with all the insurance companies, and then I can really get the best price. If you're gonna share my data, might as well give it to all of them and see what you can do for me. But I would prefer if I could, at least have the initialization there. I shouldn't have to share that data with anyone if I don't have to. And I think that is where regulatory there will have to be some regulatory work as well. And there's a lot of people that are starting to focus on this in the auto space, whether it's the right to repair laws or privacy around cars. There's been some legislation that's being passed around this. There needs to be ways for users to own their data end to end without having to give it up to anyone, without having to rely on somebody else's servers or anything like that. And, our vision is that can live on DIMO. And yeah, there might be a world where you want to actually connect your car, but the only person who's ever going to have data and access to that is going to be you. And you can effectively run your own node. You can set up your own server. You can download apps right to your car that don't network into the global system. But we want to make sure that users are in control of that data, because it's going to be something that's extremely valuable and extremely important to maintain control of.
Well, it sounds like you're one of the few projects where there is a regulatory has a regulatory tailwind. That is not something you hear very often. Now, as we know, regulatory tailwinds can be very slow, so you don't want to bet anything just on that. But you're on the right side of it. It sounds like, which is usually the crypto companies are way ahead and hoping the regulatory just doesn't stop them. Here, it sounds like there's real potential for that to push you. Question: how many cars do you think you have to have on the network to be what you would consider at scale? If you have 85,000 today, is that it? Is that a great number, or is that not interesting to insurance companies because they're all over different locations, not one area? Or is it I need 100 million in just California to be relevant? How do you think about that?
We're having conversations with a lot of big companies already, even at just 85,000. And I think we'll have our first, let's say, insurance partners launch, in the not too distant future, and probably around 100,000 cars. I think, 100,000 cars is enough to be pretty interesting to a lot of companies. I think 1 million is the number where it becomes quite undeniable. And that's just also the biggest automakers I know. It's a nice big round number, but they're making a few million cars a year. So you kind of have to get into that seven figures to be really, really compelling. But we look at it as not just the number of cars that are connected to DIMO, but also how active those cars are. So, if we had 1 million cars that were just connected to one single application built on DIMO, still fairly impressive and probably, is undeniable and opens a lot of doors. But 500,000 cars that are using a handful of different apps where people are really putting this data to work and, using connected insurance and connected maintenance products and other things built on DIMO, I think is, equally as impressive. It's all about building both sides of the ecosystem at once.
Well, you can think of either taxi groups or even Uber, right? Imagine Uber does this and decides it can offer better insurance to its drivers if they share data. I mean, then you just scoot up.
Yeah. And we've started a lot of, smaller taxi and Turo groups already, have started adopting DIMO, working with some larger and larger fleets on that front. So hopefully we can continue to just work down that path.
Awesome. What other projects in DePIN, going back to our early questions about defining it, what other projects do you find interesting or compelling? You think people should know about?
Yeah, I think that there's a handful of interesting projects in the power and energy space. I think of React, Arcrene, PowerPod. I mean, those are folks that are like really trying to figure out whether it's electric vehicle charging or connected, infrastructure, solar infrastructure, and things like that in the home. Those are really interesting to me. I think that makes a lot of sense. And in terms of like creating, I was like, where is there a lot of surface area for different kinds of devices to connect to so that you can really create interesting and interoperable experiences? That's one that I would pay a lot of attention to. And then, of course, I think telecom just like remains one of the best areas. And Helium has obviously done a lot of great work with Helium Mobile, but we're seeing a whole bunch of others. XNet is, seeing more noise about them. And there's a lot of really interesting projects in that space that I think telecom is already a great fit for because it's somewhat decentralized and you have all these small little telecom players, WISPs and other, small telephone companies. Like it just makes a ton of sense for people to be able to own that infrastructure on their own.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about telecom is you can do this with crowdsourced infrastructure or very little, and so that is a massive advantage versus the incumbent. So I agree with you there. And we just had XNet on like this week actually came out.
Oh, cool! Awesome.
Well, so and backing up even further, our whole ecosystem started off with Bitcoin. Give us end of the year, end of 2024. What's a Bitcoin prediction?
Interesting. I love Bitcoin. It's definitely my first love in the crypto space. I will refrain from doing any monetary predictions around Bitcoin. Boo. I do anticipate that the I think that will, the interesting thing around Bitcoin to me lately has been this resurgence around the layer 2 conversation. And the notion of a Bitcoin layer 2 or smart contracts on Bitcoin goes back so far. And I think a lot of people who are new to the space think that they're like discovering this like new thing that's happening. It's like proof stock and stacks. And like people have been trying to do this for a very long time. And I think that the latest L2 narrative is, I don't know, I find it a little bit thin. I kind of think that Bitcoin is going to go through its own like, all these L2s are really exciting, and then kind of just come back to the like, we have extremely hard money here, and like that's actually what matters. We don't need smart contracts on Bitcoin to like make Bitcoin work. It already works just by being itself. So I have a feeling
we have other projects that do everything else.
Right. Yeah. So I have a feeling that actually this like layer 2, and I think like all the layer 2 stuff is actually holding back any Bitcoin price appreciation because like people are trying to put money into these layer 2s and hope, I don't know, it just like, it's like to me a very complicated way to think about Bitcoin becoming more valuable. And it's like Bitcoin is more valuable because it's great hard money. Like that's the end of the story, not because some layer 2 has some complicated, now we have restaking on Bitcoin. I don't know. Like that stuff needs to go away. I think when that goes away, things really get even more exciting for Bitcoin.
Well, I mean, I'll phrase your comment slightly differently, but I agree to some extent, which is that the sound money concept is a super simple, easy story, digital gold, superior to gold, etc. And if you start to, that's super easy. It resonates, ETF flows. We've seen it, right? Like there's no need to get more fancy than that at all. It doesn't mean to me that these other projects, I don't think they're really siphoning it away, and luckily they're small enough that the broader world has no idea about that. We're a little deep in to understand this L2 conversation, but that's not at, State of Wisconsin Investment Board buying Bitcoin. It has no idea. Like, it's not paying attention to the L2. So I think we're a little okay from that side, at least for now.
I just think it's probably cannibalizing a little bit of the maybe it's not, to your point. Wisconsin's not looking at that and being like, oh, that's that now there's L2s coming for Bitcoin, so now we're getting off the fence. Certainly not, but I just think like we're gonna enter, like, that kind of hypiness will eventually fade away, and people will come back to it's hard money, and it's just going to continue to trudge on as the flag bearer of what permissionless means. And I think that to me is like, every time I really come back, and obviously spending a lot of time in DePIN, and we're building on Ethereum, so we build on Polygon and Ethereum. You spend a lot of time in these other ecosystems, and every time you like kind of come back around and get back into the Bitcoin ecosystem, you're like, the world is simple here, and it feels good in a lot of good ways.
Fair enough. Well, listen, certainly agree with you there. How do people find you? How do they find DIMO? What's your preferred, messaging or following platform?
So I'll rattle them off. Twitter, DIMO_network, and I'm Alex S. Rawitz. You can find us on Twitter there. You can join the DIMO community on Farcaster. We're getting more and more active over there, and I think I have the same handle on Farcaster as I do on Twitter. And then our website is dimo.zone if you want to check out kind of the big vision for DIMO. And if you're really just a driver who's looking to get connected, drivedimo.com is the best place to start.
Awesome. Well, let's get some more drivers. We got to get to that 1 million driver mark. So let's get that going. Well, awesome, Alex. Thank you for joining. Can't wait to get you back on with when there's more drivers, more traction. And I think what's great is you've got to have some of the 85,000 users is a big number in DePIN. And so congratulations on getting that milestone. And I'm sure there's a lot more coming. So thanks
Tom.
for joining.
Appreciate it.